Namaste. I'm Christie from Wheel of Life Wellness. And today we're going to talk about Tadasana, mountain pose. This is a pose that everybody thinks is really easy, very simple, but it's actually quite intricate. So a couple of things to start off. First of all, the reason my arms are in the position they're in is because this is the back of the arm and the back of the hand. This is the front of the arm and the front of the hand. So we want to be in alignment when we are in any position. So the foundation of Tadasana is your feet. When we talk about hip width apart, people tend to focus on here. This is the pelvis. And if you look at the anatomy of the body, the skeleton, the hip joints kind of end up being around mid-thigh. So when we bring our feet hip joint width apart, with our toes pointing forward, so notice how you're hanging out. When our feet are hip joint width apart, we have an easier time to stack the joints than if we are pelvic width apart. There's no right or wrong. It's just about understanding the anatomy and what we're seeking to do. And in this case, for Tadasana, mountain pose, we're really looking for strength, stability, and alignment in our position. So feet hip joint width apart with the toes pointing forward. And one of the things that is really interesting to note is that when we come standing, we tend to lean a little bit more into the arches of our feet. I want you to see if you can just shift your weight distribution back just a touch, so that you're a little bit more aligned with the front part of the heel for each foot. And when we have our position or our weight distribution just a little bit in the front part of the heel, it takes the pressure off the arches, and our arches don't fall as much. So once we get our legs, our feet in position and our weight distribution aligned, another thing I want you to notice is, are you pulling up on your quadriceps? Are you locking your knee joints and kind of pulling up? That's actually my go-to position. And I have to consciously remind myself to let go of the quads and that I can hold myself up without my knees locking and pulling up on the quadriceps, the front part of the thighs. So then I want you to think about your pelvic basin. So a lot of us have issues with our pelvis because we sit too much, we're not active enough, and when we are active, our alignment is off. So oftentimes what happens is we get a anterior pelvic tilt, which means the front part of the pelvis dips down, the tailbone kind of pokes out a little bit, and then we get a lot of compression in the lumbar area. The flip side of that, literally, is a posterior pelvic tilt, where the back part of the pelvis dips down, the front part of the pelvis lifts up too high, and that kind of counteracts the lumbar curve. So we have curves in our spine for a reason. It helps with mobility, it helps to absorb shock, and we need those curves. We just don't want to accentuate them. So in our standing posture, we want a neutral pelvis. So you can see it in my shirt, that there's a shift in my pelvis. But when I find that neutral position, everything just kind of eases out and evens out. So the pelvic position is really important. And then with the arms, when our arms are forward, we're internally rotating the shoulders, which actually leads us to round our upper back, and it caves the chest. And what we want is to alleviate that, not by pushing the chest out, but rather by externally rotating the shoulder joints so that the shoulders and arms find their neutral position. Another thing to think about is the head. In our society, there's a lot of this. Head off the torso. We see that with our texting, a lot with video games and so on. And for the head to be off center and off torso, we are adding a tremendous amount of pressure to the spine. And it's pressure that the spine is not designed to carry long term. So when we are in our aligned Tadasana, ankles are below the knee joints, knees are below the hip joints, hips are below the shoulder joints, and then the ears are in line with the shoulders. Notice how I'm not pushing my chin in. Neutral means strong yet relaxed. Another thing to think about, just like the pelvis, we want our thoracic area, our rib cage area, to be neutral. So we don't want to be lifting up the chest and dropping the back of the ribs. We also don't want to be caving the chest and rounding the upper back. We want neutral pelvic basin and neutral thoracic area. It's not about being tight and stiff. Think of, the expression in the military, attention, right? We're not standing at tension. We're standing in our strength, in our stability, in our personal alignment. And as easy as this position may look, if you haven't been doing this position with me through this video, I invite you to come standing and replay this video from the beginning to the end, standing in Tadasana. And I guarantee you're gonna feel a lot of work. And the reason for that is because we are not used to holding ourselves up. In our society, we tend to lean. I see it a lot in elevators, leaning back, slouched, texting. It takes strength to stand up. Tadasana is an active pose. It's a yang pose. It's not passive. There's work being done. And this work, as subtle as it's intended to be, is extremely important to our overall physical mobility and physical strength. So thank you for your time. Until next time, namaste.